Let the power of your Knight flow through your veins. Let the ghosts of your throne whisper wisdom into your mind. Let steel be your sinews and fire be your fists. Become your Knight as it becomes you, and through symbiosis ascend. So shall you become. So shall you protect your people and slaughter your foes.
The galaxy harbors many dangerous foes of unimaginable power. Born from the foul manifestations of the warp, ancient technologies fall sundered to dust, and horrors spill forth from the outer edges of the galaxy. Foes that mortal men, nor even the angels of death, can stand against. For those terrible foes, the Omnissiah provides a force capable of destroying gargantuan enemies. Historic, noble instruments of war, the Imperial Knights. Across the span of the galaxy, there exist Knight Worlds, planets founded during the Dark Age of technology and ruled over by knightly houses. Utilizing the powers of the STCs that had been provided to their fleets, the settlers of these feral worlds would craft the first so-called Titans. The Omnissiah's engines of war would expunge the vicious wildlife in Xenos, who threatened their newly colonized homes. Forming feudal societies, the noble houses would pledge to defend their citizens in exchange for their loyalty. The aristocracy of these worlds would over time evolve, and with this, so too, would their technologies be starved of the Omnissiah's blessings. With their reunification of their Mechanicum masters during the Age of Strife, the noble houses would accept settlers of the Adepts of Mars to improve their failing technologies. The Mechanicum rebuilt their worlds and provided great insight into the restoration of their machines of war. With their reunification of their Mechanicum masters, a symbiotic relationship would form, the Mechanicum providing materials and support from their forged worlds, whilst the Knight Worlds would provide the might of their Titans to protect from foul Xenos incursions. Transferring knowledge from planet to planet, the Mechanicum would adapt the Titans, transforming them into Knights, capable of being piloted by a singular host. Standing at over 30 to 40 feet tall, each Knight is protected not only with dense adamantium-plated armor, but also ion shields, preventing damage to their more vulnerable limbs with only a thought from the pilot needed to project the shielding. Smaller in stature, these Knights would nonetheless prove to be far better suited to the mobile warfare prevalent within the Knight Worlds. Though with the dawning of the Great Crusade, these worlds and their noble houses should soon be drawn to fight outside the purview of their worlds, and into the larger galaxy at the behest of the Emperor of Mankind. The Knights of the Throne Mechanicum would pledge their allegiances to both the Imperium and the Adepts of Mars, the servants of the Emperor known as Questor Imperialis, and the vassals of the Omnissiah known as the Questor Mechanicus. Within the Knight Houses, there are a variety of Knight configurations, each weapon configuration attributing different titles, the Questorus pattern Knights being the most commonly deployed throughout the galaxy. Knight Paladins are armed with a giant battle cannon and chainsword, making them suited to almost any engagement. Knight Errants armed with thermal cannons capable of vaporizing anything caught within their blast. Knight Preceptors fight with Last Impulses, Reaper Chainswords, and Thunderstrike Gauntlets, making them excel in close combat with large opponents. Knight Majoras are deployed for shock assaults, whilst Knight Styrax models are designed for the rampant slaughter of all enemy combatants. Crusader Knights are used as the spear tip of assault lines, intended to utilize their battle cannons, Gatling cannons, melter guns, and thermal cannons to carve paths through enemy defenses, whilst Knight Wardens engage enemies in close to mid-range combat with Avenger Gatling cannons, Reaper Chainsaws, missile launchers, and Thunderstrike Gauntlets. Finally, of the Questoris, Knights Gallant serve as melee-oriented fighters, focusing on carving a path through other large opponents with Reaper Chainsaws and Thunderstrike Gauntlets. There are also the Zerastus pattern Knights. Faster and more heavily armored Knights, they are also much older and thus rarer than the commonplace Questoris pattern. Castigator Knights are designed to combat smaller ground forces with their Castigator bolt cannons. Atropos Knights exclusively combat Heretical and Xenos war engines. Acheron Knights engage enemies at close range with heavy flamers and chainsaws, and Lancer Knights combat their foes in melee range with Cerastus shock lancers and iron gauntlet shields. Yet there also exist larger patterns of Knights. From the Dominus patterns, Knight Castellans are engineered to attack enemies at long range with its Volcano Lancers and Plasma Decimators, to the Knight Valiant, which confronts its foes at close range with Thunder Coil Harpoons, Conflagration Cannons, Shield Breaker Missiles, and Siege Breaker Cannons. Though of all the readily deployed Knights, the largest are a Castus pattern. The Knight Porphyrion, armed with twin-linked Magma Las Cannons, Helios Defense Missiles, Ironstorm Missile Pods, Autocannons, Las Cannons, and Ear-Out Cleansers, can lay waste to entire armies without aid. Whilst the Knight Asterius fights with pairs of beam cannons and additional back-mounted Karaknos mortar batteries and Volkite culverins. Though the knightly houses also have use for smaller units within their ranks, used primarily to support their larger variants in engagements, these smaller knights still prove to be vital in maintaining operational and unit cohesion within larger engagements. Warglaive Knights support from close range with Reaper Chainswords and Thermal Spears. Helverin Knights are highly mobile and provide fire support with the use of their Helverin autocannons, heavy stubbers, and melter guns, with the Moirax pattern utilizing mortar batteries and Volkite culverins to provide mid-range support. And finally, there also exist highly specialized patterns assigned to only the most notable leaders amongst the Knight houses. These being the Knight Baron, a highly customized suit that is usually armed with rapid-fire battle cannons and power lancers, and some Knight patterns being assigned the title of Knight Seneschal, often accompanying ruling lords of the Knight houses in a predominantly ceremonial role. Deployed via Macros Landers, Cathedral Invasion Landers, and Dropkeeps, depending on the size of the battlefield scope, Imperial Knights are harbingers of pure destruction. Their deeds and titles worthy of both the halls of heroes amongst many worlds and cultures, and also the most wretched scrawlings of madmen and tyrants on the despoiled worlds under the thrall of chaos. There is still much to elucidate amongst the ranks of the Questor Imperialis and Questor Mechanicus, but those are tales for another time. For today, this has been an account of the Mechanicus. I have been the Archmagos. Praise the Omnissiah, and blessings of the Machine God be upon you.